Boom, we're back, and today we have the complete video for the tournament in Minneapolis. The first guy to be competing at the tournament is Matt. Matt is a stud that just got his blue belt from Brock Larson, and he decided to compete in 3 different divisions. He was even smart, and he got to the gym early just so he could work on his guillotine passes, which you won't see him do in any of his roles. The first division that he had coming up was the absolute no-gi division. His first opponent was against another blue belt, and his name is William. Matt starts off fast by looking for hand control. He eventually finds a time where he can shoot a nice single leg, but William does a good job sprawling out on Matt. Unfortunately, William gets a little antsy and he tries to jump over Matt, and they end up in a leg lock battle. It's important that Matt gets on top from this position because no takedown has been scored yet, and Matt needs to start off with a strong lead of 2 points. He pushes off of William, and then he does come up on top by listening to me, and he gets his first 2 points. When Matt is in guard, I lied about he's not going to go for his guillotine pass. He looks for the guillotine pass, but William does a nice job turning with him, and now William is in bottom front head, and he starts to work his own takedown. William drives forward, and this gives him 2 points for his own sweep, as they technically score this as him being on top. But Matt does a nice job reversing this position, and then he gets 2 more points for another sweep, as they had this little bit of a dogfight position. Matt is now looking to take control of the back, and he wants to throw some hooks in. He's using his knee to create pressure, and then he pulls him over to the side. However, William does a nice job by going to his butt so he can turn into Matt, and now he's working on top. Now that he reversed their position, he can look to get his own lead going. William looks for his own head attack with the front head. However, he loses this position when he transitions to the darce, and Matt is able to free his head. Matt also grabs control of the wrist, and now we have a different battle as Matt is trying to get out from underneath him and score some more points. Matt has great control over the wrist, however the ref is going to restart them in the middle. As they restart, Matt decides he wants to stall out a victory because he has the point lead, and he closes to the guard and he locks down underhooks on William. But they transition as Matt's looking for his own sweep, and he's also trying to set up a triangle. This triangle doesn't work, and William is able to turn into Matt. Then they're back in the full guard, and Matt is still looking for the same attacks. William knows that he's down the score, so he's really trying to open this guard so he can continue to advance and score some more points and potentially pass this guard. But Matt is getting out on his hips, and he's looking to attack the arm. However, he's way too low on the shoulder clamp. He looks for another triangle as the camera goes out of control, and William's doing a nice job shrugging his shoulders in to avoid this triangle and to posture up. Matt is able to kick the leg out, and he gets on top for his own sweep and to get another point lead. From here, he's going to immediately jump past William's guard, and he passes into side control to get some more points for passing guard. However, he is not able to maintain this position as William is able to re-guard on him, but at least Matt was able to stay in side control long enough to get his points. He's pushing back into William, and William is looking to attack because he knows he's down and he's short on time. Matt comes back in, and he doesn't listen to me when I say to attack the knees instead. He goes right for the head. However, his guillotine game isn't strong enough, and William is able to get on top of Matt and get his own sweep points. The timer is almost done, and Matt is controlling the wrist really strongly, and he wants to push himself back into full guard. If he can get to full guard, then he can secure the victory. Luckily, he goes over the leg, and he's maintaining control over William. Matt secures the full guard position, and this allows him to wait it out until the end of the time, and the referee calls it off. Matt is able to get his hand raised in his first absolute no-gi match, and he did a great job. Matt's able to rest a little bit, but he only has about 10 minutes until his next match. He spends every second game planning meticulously for the next match, which is against a purple belt. This purple belt's name is Timothy, and he has a pretty good record on his own. He has 50 wins by age 23. I can't really get behind Timothy's style, and that's because as soon as the match starts and they make hand contact, he immediately sits down. Now this bodes well for Matt because Matt is better on top, but he still has to try and enter the purple belt's guard, which can be a task on its own. He fights the legs a little bit before he decides to move in. As he moves in, he's looking for the underhook, but Timothy is doing a nice job using a shield to create some space between the two. This is going to become a little bit of a stalling contest at this point as Matt tries to exit and re-enter on better terms. As he re-enters, Timothy is looking to frame out and create a nice base against Matt. He's not setting up too many attacks here, but he is looking for elbow control as the time is continuing. If he can score late, that'll be a good lead for him. He's starting to work up and he grabs an underhook with his right arm on Matt's left shoulder. Matt goes forward, but Timothy's able to sit up and he's going to start working his own attack. He's looking towards the front head sweep with the guillotine, but Matt's able to pop his head out. He extends Matt forward and then he shoots over his leg for the omoplata. This is a crucial time because the score is currently tied, so this would be the first point lead. I'm shouting at Matt to stand up and shrug the shoulder because he needs to get Timothy off of him. This omoplata isn't that tight, so he can definitely start to posture. However, Matt does the wrong thing and he tries to toss him and he gives Timothy too much momentum, which allows him to get the sweep and secure the first 2-point lead. From here, Matt is in recovery mode. In this absolute division, he can go up against even black belts, so the game played at this level is a lot more about the points and maintaining position, even if it's only a 2-point lead. Matt is trying to scoot his hips out because he needs to get a sweep set up and he's trying to create some offensive pressure. Timothy, however, is scooting out and he's trying to maintain wrist control before trying to advance and pass the guard. Not a ton of action is happening between the two, and that's to be expected at a tournament versus rolling at your gym. At your gym, everything is a lot more relaxed, so a lot more positions happen. However, in the tournament, everyone is tense and they want to secure their lead and then stay in the lead. We can see here that Timothy is moving in different spots, but he's not trying too hard to pass this guard. Matt's looking for a Kimura, and once he has this, he's rotating hard on his hips. He does a nice job elevating him, however, he needs to keep turning, but Timothy looks to elevate the leg, which is going to make it difficult to use his hips, so Matt should try and go a different direction. Timothy looks to counter with his own Kimura attack, and this is going to be tough to do because Matt is so powerful. However, he does look to extend it and he goes for the straight arm lock instead once he realizes the Kimura isn't there. The straight arm lock also isn't there as Matt is pulling the shoulder back, so he transitions to a different attack where he goes over the head. Matt decides to bonk him nicely with his hand right in the chin, and now Timothy has to move to a new position. Matt is doing a nice job creating space, but he doesn't have a ton of time. It's a 5-minute round, which is not a lot of time when it took 2 minutes to get the first 2 points. Timothy's trying to move past the legs, but Matt does a nice job regarding, and then they're back in the guard position. Timothy is able to pass Matt's guard, and we're going to have to rewatch this one because it was a nice setup that he did to secure his 3 points. If we look at the left leg, he uses an instep to create a wall against Matt. As he jumps, he uses his hand to push the knee by, and then he secures the 3-point pass. This next part is also slowed down because it's good transition between the two. As Matt is in side control, he's looking to use an underhook, but Timothy counters by doing a nice mount attempt. Now, the good thing for Matt, however, is he's able to escape out the back door, so he did not lose some more points from the mount attempt. Unfortunately for our hero, that brings us to the end of the round, so Timothy was able to best Matt with a score of 5-0. It was still a good attempt for Matt, however. The bad part about losing this early in the absolute division is that he did not get another match, so he was out of this league. Nonetheless, we all still like Matt, so he won't be kicked out of the gym.
How do you think Matt did?
Okay.
You think
he survived?
Yeah. What does he need to work on?
Some more matches passed by, but it wasn't long until Matt had to prepare for his gi division. Matt was suited up and he was ready to go to compete with the other blue belts. He definitely had enough competitors to go against in this bracket. Matt walks onto the mat and he's going against another blue belt, but this one has quite a few more stripes than Matt does. They shake hands and start immediately, and Matt does something he definitely said he was not going to do. As soon as the two make contact, Matt decides he wants to sit to guard. He doesn't even want to try for his takedown points, and he sits in this closed guard for a while until his opponent starts to move around. Matt is strongly attacking the collar because he wants to try and set up a collar choke, but he's also looking to set up the De La Riva guard every time his opponent stands. He throws his leg in and he's trying to establish the De La Riva to get a nice sweep going. Matt could not extend the leg far enough, so his opponent re-enters the closed guard as Matt is going to attack with the collar grips and he's looking for a cross-collar choke. So the big question is, can Matt finish him with this choke? Yep. He gets the tap and he finishes the match just like that for his first victory of the blue belt gi division. 5 minutes later, Matt's back at the mat again and he's ready to take on his next opponent. This time, he's up against a blue belt with 2 stripes instead of 4. The ref starts to match and they're off right away. We can see here that Matt quickly works behind his opponent, but he's not scored any points for a takedown, despite me definitely saying it's worth that. He tries to roll to his back to establish some back control, but he's not able to secure his hooks long enough to score any points. He is able to grab the lapel and he starts working on a brand new choke. He's looking for another collar choke against his opponent, but he has to pull him over to the back once again to get a better angle. He even claws the face a bit to move his head to set up this choke and to finish his opponent. I'm telling Matt to move on his hips so he can scoot it to the side, but Matt has a different option. Instead, he's going to go towards the bow and arrow to get the tap and end the match.
Perfect.
That's 2 submissions for our boy Matt in the blue belt gi division. I would love to say that Matt had a nice break in between matches, but that simply isn't true. And his next opponent is going to be one of his toughest in the tournament. You can tell the guy is a stud because he rolls with a ring on. Matt leads the attack by first going for the collar grips, and he's starting to make some motion so he can get the first takedown. However, his opponent decides that he's going to pull guard and he's not going to give the takedown points to Matt. Now Matt has to work on top of the opponent, and he's trying to push some pressure into him so he can get the pass going. Matt stands up so he has a new avenue to attack this guard. However, when he takes a big step, his opponent catches him, and now his opponent looks for the triangle. Matt does not posture up despite all my great advice telling him to do so, but he does a nice job squaring into the opponent, and his opponent has to resettle in close guard. Matt decides the standing life is not for him, and he sits down in the opponent's guard as he looks to open it. I'm continuously telling him to shove his knee in the butt so he can create some space, but that was not seen as he goes back to the standing position. His opponent grabs his ankles, and he's not in too much danger yet, but then he rotates on his shoulders and he gets under Matt's right leg, and he's able to sweep him over with a pencil sweep, giving him the first 2-point lead in this match. Due to his great positioning, he's able to pass Matt's guard immediately, and he's now working into side control position. It takes the referee an exorbitant amount of time to give him the passing points that he deserves, but he gets them right before Matt puts him right back in half guard. Matt creates a nice shield guard, but the reset in the middle, and he has some dire time constraints working against him. He only has about 90 seconds left in the match, and he's down 0-5. In this type of situation, you really need to get going because the other guy's going to stay on top of you, and they're not going to create too much motion since they're ahead. Matt tries working the same collar chokes that he did in his last match, but it's not quite working against this guy. They get reset once again, and as soon as the ref says to go, his opponent's pushing hard into him, but not too hard that he's going to get swept. Matt has a great moment going for him here because he's able to get his legs out, and he starts working on a triangle, which leads us into a first major attack on bottom. As Matt goes to tighten the triangle, his opponent is able to get his head free, so Matt quickly counters this by going for an omoplata, and he's able to lock the shoulder down very quickly even though his opponent is trying to run around the guard. Matt does a fantastic job controlling the belt as he wants to control his opponent's posture. His opponent starts to move backwards, but Matt stays behind him to create a better angle. Matt is eventually able to push off of his foot once he had a base, and this is going to help him propel the omoplata forwards to get the final tap within the last minute of the round when he was down 0-5. It was scary to watch this one because Matt was close to losing and didn't have much time left. Thankfully, he got the victory with the omoplata, and that was a great match between the two. Matt was able to relax a little bit after this match, but his next one is going to be extremely important, and here's why. There are 12 blue belts in this league that all want to advance to the finals. Luckily, Matt was equipped with a butter knife for this competition. Now, they don't have enough time for you to go against everybody, so if you can beat everyone you go against, you get to go to the finals. But there is one man left in Matt's way, so we all know what he had to do from here. Matt walked out to his next match with his butter knife securely tucked in his pocket. He went up against a new blue belt, but this one only had one stripe. His opponent enters an interesting stance, and they start going at it. It doesn't take too long until Matt's opponent decides he doesn't want to do anything with the wrestling after they've been tying up, and he decides to pull guard. Once they move away from the camera, Matt hits a beautiful standing pass and is working into side control, and he already has a nice 3-point lead over his opponent. From side control, Matt continues to pressure his opponent, and he has a great grip over the back of the gi. This gives him excellent hip control against his opponent. It's going to be very hard for his opponent to shrimp out. However, they do start moving really close towards the end of the match, and they are going to have to be reset in the middle. The two finally figure out what position they were in, and then they can restart the match. And while there's clearly a battle going on between these two competitors, there's another battle you guys need to know about as well. That battle is between me with the camera and the referee in his pants. Every time I'm trying to get a better angle, he quickly counters my camera movement. I even move over to the new side to get a better shot, and once again, he counters my motion with his own stepping technique. This is proving to be a big issue in this match, and I'm trying to work my best to get around him. While I had that huge battle going on with the referee, Matt is continuing to pressure his opponent in side control. Matt's goal going into this tournament was to submit everybody, so he doesn't want to win on points against his opponent. He's trying to get free from this position because his opponent is locking down his shoulder because he doesn't want to get moved at all. The wonderful coaching that you can't quite hear is that I'm telling Matt to attack the knee so he can move right into mount or knee mount. Matt, however, does not want to hear any of that advice from me. Instead, he's deciding to attack the left pant leg of his opponent, and he's trying to do a knee slide across the belly to get into mount. This is a good attack, and he definitely made it successful by pulling it off against his opponent, but it could have been much easier if we attacked the knee. Now, his opponent is rolling out as he timed Matt correctly, but Matt's doing a nice job staying behind him, and he's able to establish some back control to get even more points. Matt is wasting no time on the back. As soon as he's here, he's immediately attacking the left lapel of his opponent because he wants to start setting up his choke. His opponent is doing some minor hand fighting, albeit not the best hand fighting, but he is not getting choked at this time, so it must be working pretty well for him. However, as he tries to get his hip to the mat, Matt is moving out to the side because he wants to set up a better angle on his own choke. Matt already had his back points, so I'd like to see him release his hooks here so it could create a better angle and potentially transfer to another bow and arrow choke like he did earlier. This would certainly give him a better angle for finishing the choke against his opponent because this is not working for him from this position. Matt releases some pressure on this choke and he goes for the other lapel, but as he does this allows his opponent to turn into him. Luckily, Matt still has his arm controlled, so this sets him up for an easy flower sweep to get right into full mount. Matt wastes no time in the mount position and he grabs the lapel. From here, he's shoving his forearm right in the throat and he gets an easy tap with a one-arm choke. Matt shakes his opponent's hand, gets his hand raised, and now he has 4 submissions in the blue belt gi division. It's great to see that Matt was successful, and after slaying his opponent, he now qualifies for the championship bracket. This beautiful diagram shows that Matt only needs 2 more wins and then he gets to take home the gold medal. For Matt's first match in the championship bracket, he had to go up against an old rival. He had to go up against the same blue belt that he faced in the first match. This is the one where he finished excellently with a wonderful collar choke. His opponent starts aggressive and he starts pushing into Matt, but Matt hits him with a wonderful trip to get his first takedown to establish a nice 2-point lead over his opponent. He immediately shuffles right into half guard and he starts putting a lot of pressure against him because he wants to pass this guard to establish an even greater point lead. From this knee cut, he's eventually able to free his knee from the half guard and he goes over the belly, but his opponent quickly turns with him and he starts getting to a bit of a leg lock battle. Matt is quickly able to push the leg off, so he's not in any danger of any leg attacks at this point. Matt starts pushing the leg by so he can work on passing this guard. I keep telling him to sprawl the leg so it's going to be hard to capture, but his opponent does a nice job shifting with him and he's able to recapture the half guard before Matt can get any points. What can't currently be seen is that Matt is working on a Kimura despite being in half guard. He's able to start jacking the arm up and then he releases one hand off of the Kimura so he can push down the leg to pass this guard while maintaining the Kimura with his other arm. He does eventually pass to get 3 more points for the lead and then he looks to finish with the submission. Once Matt passes, he just has to connect his hands and then... Can Matt finish this Kimura? Of course he can. He's the master. He wins this match by Kimura and he's moving on to the championship match. We bust out our handy dandy diagram to see that Matt has 1 opponent left. However, his opponent came equipped with his own scissors because winning this is just as good as winning ADCC. Matt steps onto the mat and he's ready to take action against his new opponent. This is Matt's most important match of the day because it's for the gold medal. And this time, his opponent's name is Thomas. Both men start out by doing the feeling out process. Matt first lunges forward, but it turns out to be just a lot of holding and grappling each other until they can decide where they'd like to go from here. They're both trying to work some better angles, but then Matt goes in for some quick trips, which is going to be his downfall as Thomas whips him around for the first takedown to get 2 points. Matt has his right leg high in the neck and he's trying to look for a triangle, but Thomas is doing a nice job shoving the leg down so he can square back into the guard and now he doesn't have to worry about the triangle choke anymore. Matt goes to break his posture because he wants to keep him low so he can start setting up his own attacks. As his opponent stands, he starts looking for a flower sweep variation, but his opponent does a nice job by re-securing the guard position and he doesn't get swept. They get reset in the middle, but not a ton of action is happening at this point. Matt's still trying to open the guard and find new attacks, while his opponent is trying to maintain control and start standing to look for a standing pass. Matt then is going towards De La Hiva, and as he does this, he does a great job extending the opponent. He's not able to finish any sweep on him as his opponent turns in, but it leads into the next attack where he can start setting up his triangle. Grabbing the shin is difficult because of his opponent's posture, so he's going to transition to going over the leg. I'm shouting at Matt to go under leg instead of over, but his opponent gives him a blessing by turning into an omoplata. Matt has some nasty belt control over his opponent and he's able to continuously push him forward by using this belt. I would like to see Matt grab the wrist, but he goes towards the collar right as the referee puts me back in his guard and I'm having another battle trying to get the camera around him. Eventually I pass his guard and Matt is applying an immense amount of torque on that shoulder. Look at the angle that the arm is at. It looks like he's about to break it and he continues to push forward until he gets the tap. By finishing his opponent with another omoplata, this awards Matt the gold medal in the blue belt gi division. We stop by Butter Knife Boy to see him step onto the podium as he's wearing his gold medal. And wow, he looks super stylish with that medal. Great job by our champ. But wait, what's that? It's time for the Asian Persuasion Mike to do his no-gi matches. Mike was doing the advanced no-gi division, so despite being a blue belt, he could go up against even black belts. His first match was against a brown belt named Luke. The standard handshaking takes place and then the match starts off immediately. Mike listened to me and he went for a quick guillotine at the start because this guy always liked to pull guard. So if you can go for the guillotine, you can set up the offense on your terms. The next step was to try and pass this guard. Mike was looking to push the knee down and then go for a backstep. As he was going for the backstep, Luke was following him, but that's great for our game plan because it puts him in the front head and Mike was setting up a great guillotine. Mike wasn't able to get his right hand high enough, so he had to bail on the guillotine and they were working in the standing position. Unfortunately, as soon as they stood, he got lateral dropped and he was put down into his guard at the edge of the mat. Since he got lateral dropped, Luke starts off with a quick 2-point lead from the takedown, and Mike is looking to advance again by sitting up and looking for another guillotine. Instead, he uses this to escape. Now from this standing position, Mike's going to go for his own offense. They're doing some hand fighting, hits a quick arm drag into a single leg. From the single leg, he immediately pushes him down and he gets right into side control, and now you get to hear my point scoring rant. If you take them down and you land in any position, you get 2 points. If you pass the guard, you get 3 points. So if you take them down, you land in guard, it's 2 points. Or if you take them down and land in mount, it's still 2 points. That's bullshit, and it should be if you land in side control, you get 2 points, plus the 3 points because you passed the guard in the air. Instead, the score is 2-2, and they're both fighting to get a lead now because the score is tied, as they both have 1 takedown each. Luke is trying to go under the leg of Mike because he wants to get a point lead advantage. He starts setting up an ankle attack here because you can go for any footlock you want in this division. Luke is able to work the leg enough where he can start going belly down and look for an ankle attack. Mike is doing a nice job and he gets his leg free, however he goes towards the guillotine and front head, which gives Luke the sweep. Again, Mike isn't able to get his right arm high enough because we have a special side control guillotine he could have attempted, but he wasn't able to get the elbow where he needed to be, so Luke was able to free his head, so the score is 4-2. Now Mike is trying to work out and he goes for the front head and they're back in the standing position. Luke frees his head and then he decides that why would he risk losing this match in a wrestling contest when Mike is the better wrestler, and he pulls guard. It's a smart game plan by Luke because it's very easy to hold a closed guard position, but this is why I believe that jiu-jitsu needs stalling calls because Luke doesn't go for the most attacks and Mike is constantly trying to open this guard so he can try and pass. You'll see that Luke goes under the leg a few times because he wants to try and get some things going. However, anytime the guard is close to being open, he'll immediately bail on the leg and he'll go back to locking up the guard so he can maintain this position. This was a very common strategy at the tournament where if you had the 2-point lead, go to close guard and then wait. Or sit on top and close guard but refuse to pass, just keep pushing into them so they can't work against you. Luke is going for the leg here, but Mike does a nice job pulling the leg back and then he shoves his head into the chin to destroy his base. He's trying so hard that he's squatting out of here, but unfortunately he runs out of time and Luke is the winner by a 2-point lead. Mike was pretty tired after the match, but he did go against a brown belt and I still believe Mike could win if they were to run it back. About 5 minutes pass by and then Mike is ready for his next match against Jared. Mike was feeling a lot better after his first match, and now he was in competition mode, so this match was quite a bit better. They're both immediately tying up, and Mike is looking for his first entry for the takedown. He's grabbing inside wrist control, then he uses the same takedown from the last match, which was the arm drag into the shot, and he earns himself 2 quick points. As soon as he lands on top, he's immediately looking for a footlock on Jared. Jared's doing a nice job not allowing this footlock to work because he's able to kick his leg free, so Mike comes back on top, so he's not going to get swept and have a tied score of 2-2. Jared looks for the shoulder crunch, but he's way too low on the arm. So Mike is able to work past the guard, even though he went to the same side that his arm was controlled. They sit in side control for a while until Jared is able to get his leg out. Once he has his leg out, he's going to push off and bridge and try and turn into Mike. Mike was ready for this attempt, so he pushes him back down and he lands in north-south as Jared looks for the ghost escape. Jared has a bit of success, but he's not using his legs enough, he's just using his arms, so he wasn't able to re-guard. Even though he's in bottom side control, he goes for the Americana like bath salts bend. Unfortunately, this doesn't work and they get reset in the middle of the mat, and this time he's going to spell his own doom as he tries to go over Mike's arm and look for Kimura. Since Mike's legs aren't controlled at all, Mike is going to turn with this Kimura and he's going to set up his own far side armbar to get the tap. Great job by Mike to get his first submission in the no-gi advanced division, and now he gets to move on to the next one. Unfortunately, his opponent didn't show up, so here's a drawing of what the match would have looked like. I know, I'm quite the artist, but Mike probably won that match by an armbar. Also, let's just take a moment to notice how good the cam girl looks right now. This is the guy that Mike was going up against next. No, not the stud in the front, the dude in the back with the rash guard on. This guy's name was Kenneth, and just ignore that I sat on the completely wrong side for who my fighter was. They shake hands and both of them start working their ties on the inside to see who can score the first takedown. Mike decides it's going to be him by dropping his level and then attacking the knee, and he also quickly passes his guard to establish a 5-point lead over his opponent. He's wasting no time and he switches his hips because he's looking for mount to get 4 more points. Mike has a wonderful 9-point lead over his opponent, but they're going to be reset in the middle of the mat because they were getting too close to me and everybody else. He brings his leg up as he's looking for a quick triangle or maybe even an armbar, but neither of them are available, so he goes back to flattening his opponent and mount. He's hoping his opponent is going to move a little bit so he can open up an opportunity for a submission. Mike even goes to knee mount, but then he quickly returns to regular mount as his opponent is not really moving at all from bottom. He brings the leg up once again, but as he does this, his opponent turns out and Mike has to go to side control so he can maintain top control. He puts himself in reverse ride as he's looking for another mount attempt to get some more points, but his opponent is doing a good job keeping his knees high, so it's harder for Mike to get his leg over. I'd like to see Mike pull the leg and then go over the leg once he has it, but instead they go towards the front head position and he's looking towards a choke. His opponent has a pretty good grip over his hands, so the choke is not going to be easy to do, and he's able to work out of this front head position because he had such good hand control. As they stand up, both men are looking for better ties so they can set up their next takedown. Mike has a great point lead here, but I'd still like to see him get another takedown because it's always great to solidify your lead with even more points. They're both doing some hand tying here before Mike decides to go for his own shot. Once his opponent pushes into him, he changes his level, he pulls out the leg, and he quick gets the takedown and gets recentered in the middle of the mat. Now the first goal in closed guard is to open the guard, and Mike's doing a good job of this by pushing his knee into the middle towards the butt. Then he's looking to stand up, which applies a lot of pressure on the opponent's hips. His opponent is also helping him out because he wants to return to the standing position as well and re-engage in the wrestling battle. Anytime you have wrestling, you need to have good ties so you can set up some good entries to get into your opponent and then set up your shot. Mike is doing just that. He's looking to snap his opponent around, grab some drags, and move the arms around as he's looking to set up another takedown. Mike is able to hear my coaching advice and he starts setting up the blast double as I'm calling for it. All he has to do here is get under his opponent, shove his head into the chest, and drive him over like a football tackle. That takedown earned Mike 2 more points, which brings the score to 13-0. And now Mike's in a familiar position where he's working inside the closed guard and he's attempting to open this guard once again. Mike is doing the right thing by trying to insert his knee, push on the hips, push on the legs, trying to open this guard. His opponent doesn't want to open his guard to set up any attacks despite being down 13 points and needs a Hail Mary submission. There's no need for Mike to work too hard because he has such a great lead, but he does finish it off with a nice side control pass, and then he ends the match with a nice score of 16-0. About 10 minutes pass by and then Mike is going into his next and final no-gi match. Mike was going against this purple belt who just tapped out the brown belt that Mike lost to in his first round. This match was very important for Mike because it was his last match of the day. He also still had a chance of getting first place, even if it meant he had to tie for first place. The two shook hands and got into it right away. Both men engage in the standing position and they both want to get the first takedown to set up a nice 2-point lead. I love seeing when both guys want to work the takedown and some wrestling. His opponent quick gets a front head on Mike and then he's going to try and snap him down from here after Mike fails on a shot. His opponent wastes no time from the failed shot and quickly spins behind him to set up a nice takedown to get his 2-point lead going. His opponent is also looking to climb the back immediately. He doesn't care for the hooks, he just wants to get the choke, and I also like seeing that. You can tell he's a wrestler. But Mike does a nice job here and he's able to push off of him and he lands up in top side control. Unfortunately, Mike gets no points despite being in side control after he was just taken down. Since he was taken down, he was clearly on bottom, and now he's on top in a much better position. Mike holds side control for a pretty long time, but his opponent is doing a nice job trying to get on his side so he can escape side control. He brings his elbow down to the mat, and this gives him an extra post. With this post, he can start working towards his knees and going towards the front head. Mike goes for the guillotine, but unfortunately the head slips out, and because the head slipped out and Mike ended on bottom, his opponent technically gets the sweep. I don't know how that counts as sweep, the side control position didn't, but nonetheless, Mike is now down 0-4. Mike was looking for a triangle, but then they had to get reset because his opponent had some blood and they had to wipe it off. His opponent checks the score and he can see that he's clearly up 4-0, so Mike has to get moving quickly. It's very easy to sit on top in closed guard and put your hands in the armpits to push against them, but not get swept. Mike is moving his legs around, he's able to get his legs around the shoulder, and he's looking towards a triangle. However, it's tough to do a triangle when they have a strong posture, and that's exactly what his opponent is doing. He's keeping a strong base and a strong posture, and Mike is going to try anything he can to try and get this move going by pushing off the mat to set up a better angle. Now, his opponent is trying to push the knee down at the same time and looking for some passes, but he's not trying that hard. He knows about his point lead. He would like to pass, I'm sure, but there's no need to overexert yourself and put yourself in a bad position. Mikey's working out towards his side because he's looking for a new angle where he can set up a sweep. This doesn't work on his left side, so he goes towards his right shoulder, and once he's on his right shoulder, he starts trying to scoop under the leg. He gets back to close guard, and as soon as he's here, he hits a beautiful hip-in sweep to go straight to mount. The only caveat is that he's not in mount long enough. You have to hold the position for 3 seconds, and his opponent is able to get his knees in and start setting up some underhooks for some butterfly sweeps. I agree with the scoring that he shouldn't have gotten mount points, but he still should have gotten points earlier for side control. Nonetheless, he got 2 points for the sweep, and now the score is 4-2. Mike knows he has to move here because the round is almost over and he's on top and close guard. As we remember from the match with the brown belt, when he's on top and close guard and the opponent has a lead, the opponent just wants to control the posture and keep the legs locked. That's exactly what his opponent is doing here. Mike is trying anything he can to get out. His opponent eventually threw up a triangle, but the round ends and he lost 4-2. Even though Mike lost, he did really well for a blue belt in the advanced division, especially when this is only his second tournament. Also, it's pretty cool that Mike got to medal and he placed higher than the brown belt did that he lost to because of how many points he scored against other opponents. Nonetheless, this concludes our saga with Mike and we move on to the white belts. Our first white belt is Josh, and he prefers to go by silverback, but I'm not quite sure if I qualify to describe him that way. Josh's first match started off really quickly where he started getting his own takedown. His opponent was constantly grabbing the head, so he was meant to be taken down. However, we have a different ref, so that means the takedown description is a little bit different. He was not awarded any points despite putting him down in the turtle position and then getting on top of his opponent. After Josh's takedown, they ended this interesting position. Josh is trying to pass the half guard and his opponent is trying to take his back. I was giving Josh such beautiful advice on how to get out of this spot where all he had to do was take his right hand and peel that hook and then he could easily pass into side control. Unfortunately, Josh did not want to listen to me and he wanted to keep trying to run around the guard while he kept his hips in the air. His opponent was able to work out and get on towards his back. Luckily, Josh was able to spin quickly to retain top control and go into his opponent's guard. However, the score was still 0-0. I was happy to see that his opponent was pretty active from the guard position. He immediately went up for a triangle and he was trying to submit Josh really quickly. I was telling Josh to keep his posture high, and I could tell he was trying to do just that. However, his opponent did a nice job by keeping him low, and then he transitioned to go under the leg, and he swept him by going straight into mount. He even kept the triangle while going into mount, and now Josh had a completely different battle, trying to fight off this mounted triangle. Josh was trying his hardest to bridge out of this position, and generally my advice is to trying to go back into closed guard because it is dang near impossible to get out of a mounted triangle. He was able to push a little bit and he could get back to the guard position, but he was still locked in this triangle until he was able to push the leg with his arms and free his head. Josh tries to pass his opponent's guard immediately, but his opponent times him well and pushes him over for a sweep, but somehow doesn't get any points. Now you have to remember that these guys are white belts, so I like the intensity they're going at, but their moves aren't always the best. His opponent is immediately on top and he's pushing directly into Josh just to create some heavy pressure on top. Josh is not opening his guard to set up any attacks, and his opponent is doing a good job staying on top because he has a nice point lead. Josh is able to start working on a far side Kimura, which is hard to see on the camera, but he listens to my advice when I'm telling him to rotate on his hips. Once he has this Kimura, he's able to rotate on top of his opponent and get his own sweep, but also not get any points. He does lose the Kimura as they're going towards the edge of the mat, and they're going to have to be re-centered in the middle because they're falling into the tables, and that's not going to be good for anyone. They get reset in the middle of the mat, but unfortunately there's not much time left. Josh is still working on top in this position, but he's down the scorecards and he doesn't have enough time to work where he can set up a better attack or go to mount. So unfortunately Josh lost this one, but he still had more matches to do in the day. This one was just building his rage meter. In Josh's next match, he was going against a wrestler, and I know this because his shirt said wrestling right on it. It took no time at all until his opponent shot a nice double leg in on him and he got the first 2 points for the takedown. Naturally, being on top, he wanted to hold Josh down at close guard because he's established his 2-point lead. My advice to Josh from here was to get on his side so he wasn't pinned on the mat, then he could start shrimping. He was sort of listening to me, but his opponent was doing a better job listening to me, and he was trying to counter my coaching with his own techniques. It wasn't too long before they were reset in the middle of the mat because they were getting dangerously close to me, and I would have guillotined both of them with one arm. It's interesting to see that a white belt wrestler was allowed in this division because when I first started with competitions, they said wrestlers had to go at least into the intermediate divisions. Now at this tournament, they only go by ranks for the gi, so if you were a white belt, you go with white belts, blue with blue, etc, but I bet you this guy probably could have done fine in the blue belt division. Josh is able to get him back into full guard, and as he's here, he's looking to establish some control over the lapels, but his opponent's doing a nice job posturing up. His opponent's been dragging him around in this closed guard for quite a while, and I'd love to see Josh open his legs or start to set up some type of sweep, because clearly his game is not working up to this point. Josh does open his guard because he's thinking about going for an armbar, but he has absolutely no control over the arm, so he definitely shouldn't have done that, and he gets his guard passed immediately as his opponent shucked the leg by. Then his opponent also went into mount, so he got 3 points for passing guard, then he got 4 points for passing right into mount, bringing the score 9-0. Once Josh is in mount, he's flattened out really quickly by his opponent. His opponent just has to maintain some hip control on Josh, and we can see here that Josh has never watched one of my videos on how to escape the mount position. He's not getting out on his side enough, and he's staying pinned on his back. Josh finally gets to his side, but his opponent is smart and transfers his weight towards his head. Then he hooks under the arm and he can set him up for a nice gift wrap or an armbar or other bad positions. Josh is able to get his back to the mat, but we can see a prime example of what dead hips look like and how not to please a woman. His opponent is wasting no time and he starts setting up an armbar, and Josh is doing a nice job locking his arms together, and then he goes back towards guard. Unfortunately, his opponent is continuing to spin and this puts them back in the mount position, but Josh is still maintaining arm control here, so he's not going to get armbarred even when his opponent tries switching to the other arm. His opponent is smart and he goes to remount because losing the position for a submission is never worth it. His opponent then tries to set up a head and arm choke and he dismounts to side control to try and finish, but unfortunately for him, they run out of time. So Josh loses this match 0-9, and you're probably wondering, when is the animal going to come out of Josh that you saw in the thumbnail? Well, Josh was biding his time until the next match, and I gave him a little friendly coaching advice. I told him not to go home with 3 losses and to go kill the guy. Josh's new match gets started right away, and his opponent's name is Arnold. These two engage in some extremely intense white belt wrestling known as just grabbing the gi and pushing back and forth. Eventually, Josh's opponent goes for a sacrifice throw, but Josh counters him and pushes him down, but does not get 2 points for this takedown. This is the first strike to build Josh's rage meter because he's not happy that he's not getting any takedown points in his matches. Eventually, Josh is able to push the leg down and is trying to pass into side control, but his opponent's doing a nice job creating some frames against him and trying to get his knee reinserted. Josh eventually does pass this guard and he can set up a nice 3-point lead over his opponent. Unfortunately for Josh, his opponent pushes against him, which allows the knee to come in, then he can shove him back into full guard. They're reset in the middle of the mat, and Josh wants to make sure that he has some points on the score, so he sees he has a 3-point lead, and now he can stall a little bit and he's shoving the arm down from the full guard position. Josh eventually listens to me when I tell him to shove the leg down so we can start working a pass. He looks for a knee cut, but his opponent is doing a good job bringing his right leg in to prevent Josh from completely passing this guard. Remember, you have to hold the position for 3 seconds, but his opponent is definitely able to get his knee in before that 3 seconds elapses. His opponent then is able to work up to his knees, and we get to see some more great white belt wrestling before they go out of bounds and Josh pops off. Now, I don't really know why Josh did this, but his opponent had to tie his belt, and as he did this, Josh wanted to maintain eye contact with him the entire time. He would not break focus at all while his opponent was tying his belt, despite this lasting really about 15 seconds. At this point, it's all over for Arnold because Josh has entered basalts mode. He pushes forward and gets a quick trip to get his first takedown and get a 2-point lead over his opponent. They go out of bounds, and even on the break, Josh is still pissed. He can't wait to get back in the action and push his opponent down into the ground. The first task that Josh has is to open this guard, but unfortunately, basalts don't make you better jiu-jitsu, they just make you angrier and tougher. Arnold makes a huge mistake. He's trying to go towards his knees and go to turtle against this monster basalts Josh. Unfortunately for Arnold, he goes to stand up and Josh is going to pick him up and slam him to the mat and somehow not get disqualified for the throw. He then passes immediately into mount, shoves his fist in the neck and gets a quick submission and pop off against his opponent. Josh is still fuming from the salts and he continues to walk around the mat. He then takes it out on his belt, picks it up and furiously puts it on. He shakes his opponent's hand and then he gets his hand raised, but the salts are still coursing through him. That was a great win for our boy, and I like seeing him get a little angry. Unfortunately, the salts ran out for Josh. He had to wear this kid's belt, and now he had a tougher and new opponent who immediately puts him in guard. Now, there's nothing wrong with being on top in closed guard, except for this opponent actually had a bottom guard game for a white belt. He opened his guard to throw the legs over the shoulder to set up first a triangle. Then he's going to rotate his hips again, and he's going to set up an armbar. He's even trying to go under the legs of Josh so he can scoop him right into mount. Eventually, he's able to extend his legs, pushing against Josh's head, and he's able to get the tap from Josh. This guy went on to win the gold for this white belt division, so good job by him. Unfortunately, basalts Josh was short-lived because he was out of the tournament at this point, but it was still great to see him try out competition. For the last roll, we get to see our boy Xavier go up against another white belt. Xavier doesn't have much jiu-jitsu experience, but he still wanted to try at the tournament, which is a great mentality to have. Xavier starts off quick by going for a shot, but his opponent is easily able to stop the attack because he got underhooks, and now he's looking for his own standing guillotine. His opponent goes for a trip, but it doesn't work, and then they're back in the middle of the mat before Xavier goes for his own trip attempt. His opponent keeps his legs back, and then they both tie up, and Xavier decides to bring him down to the mat with a small snap, and now he's in the front head position. I wish Xavier went to wrestling class because he could easily have scored from this spot, but instead he goes behind and does not block the arm. Because of this, his opponent grabs his leg, and then he starts turning into Xavier's guard. Xavier does have some hooks in, and he's able to get his hips off the mat, but his opponent is going to continue to try and work out the back door. If Xavier could have scooted back, he would have been able to score the first lead with a nice 2-point lead from the takedown, but unfortunately his opponent gets out, and then they get into this weird scramble where his opponent ends up in donkey mount. They next are reset in the middle of the mat because they're working at the corner. They're reset in the donkey mount position, which is completely foreign to Xavier and it does not bode well for him. His opponent is able to grab his left arm and you can't see it, but he's setting up an Americana. Xavier is then trying to bridge to stop this, but he has to tap as it was pretty tight for an Americana, and unfortunately he lost this match. Xavier had other matches in the bracket, but I was too busy filming other people at the same time that I was not able to capture all of his roles. I was, however, able to capture Matt's one and only no-gi roll, and this one was against a purple belt who's also a fan of my YouTube channel. His name is John. Both of these guys are engaging in the standing contest because they both want to score their first takedown for the 2-point lead, which is what I like to see. John is famous for going for some throw-bys, and Matt attempts a single leg here. However, when he has his single leg, he decides to let go of the leg and he goes around the waist, so he was never going to be able to secure this shot. John is able to get his hips out, and then he's safe from the single, and he continues to look for some more throw-bys, and Matt does not shoot off the break. When your opponent circles out after a throw-by, it's easy to go for a shot, so I'd like to see Matt go for that. Instead, as he circles back into the mat, he goes for a single leg on John once again, but this time with the single, he's staying low to look for the finish. He gets a quick 2-point score from the ref, and I was surprised to see he got the takedown that early. Once he has the 2 points, he starts to work around his opponent from the side, he pulls the knee out, and then he gets on top to establish some top control. John, however, is very active on bottom as soon as the takedown is completed. He immediately starts looking for an inverted heel hook on Matt, but Matt does a nice job pushing against the butt, so he's able to free the knee line. However, John comes on top of Matt and he's able to succeed with a nice 2-point sweep. They get reset in the middle of the mat and Matt has his left leg over the back. He's also trying to scoop under the left leg of John. If he could pull the leg over his chest, he could look for his own 2-point sweep, but instead John is going for a quick footlock and Matt has to spin out of here. Matt is doing a nice job trying to control John's posture so he can start to set up a sweep or potentially even a guillotine attack. However, John is passing into the half guard and Matt inserts his knee shield. The knee shield is great, however his opponent brings up his right leg as well, which should tell Matt that he's looking for a footlock. Once John has the foot, he arches back and he finishes Matt with a quick footlock. I was unable to see what type of footlock it was to cause the submission, but let's just go with a heel hook. Either way, great job by John, and that was Matt's only no-gi match. The tournament was a lot of fun, but also a long day. It was nice to see that some of our guys like Matt got some great submissions, but ultimately at the end of the day, we were all super hungry. So we left the gym, and now everybody gets to see the healthy diet that these athletes have after competition. Now if you're like me, you probably think healthy and you think Five Guys is the first thought that comes to your mind, because there's no healthier food than American food. This wraps up the videos for this Minneapolis tournament, and I hope to do more in the future. If you appreciate the video, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and don't forget you can use my link in the description to get awesome gear from X Marshall.